grandmother and a great-grandfather and a great-aunt during this time. And so we're lighting in memory of those people in our family and in honor of two people without whom we would not be here.
That's very true.
So we're glad they survived on a lot of levels.
I'm honored to introduce you to Rolf and Mira Grayson. Mira was born in Germany in February of 1927, where she was raised by her widowed mother and attended public school for as long as the Jewish children were allowed. She then attended private Jewish school. On October 28, 1938, Mira and her mother were expelled along with all the other Jews of Poland of Germany back to Poland. While in Poland, word came out that some children under the age of 16 would be permitted to go to England. Mira arrived in London in January of 1939. Her mother perished in Auschwitz. Rolf Grayson was born in Munich in 1921. He was expelled from public school along with all other Jewish children at the age of 13. He was then sent to a factory to learn a trade. Rolf was very active in the Zionist movement, and when England stopped all permits allowing Jews to go to Palestine in 1936, he was part of a committee organizing groups of children for illegal aliyah to Palestine. He came to England in August of 1939, where he met Mira. They were married in July of 1944. They came to the United States in 1948. Rolf attended night school and obtained an engineering degree. They have a son, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. As survivors, they remain as actively involved in Holocaust remembrance as possible. They share their story with others so that it may never be forgotten. May I introduce Rolf and Mira Grayson.
Thank you for your indulgence to allow us to sit, because we're not as young as we used to be.
Use the mic.
Makes it much easier. I have a tendency in my voice to droop periodically, so in case I fall off, please raise your hand and let me know so you can hear me. Okay. We would like to thank Joy Glucksman and Susie Goldstein for inviting us here to speak to this gathering about our experiences during the period of the Nazi Germany. I'm certain you can appreciate the difficulty that we are having in undertaking such a thing, inasmuch as it forces us to relive all those unpleasant years that we have gone through, which we are so desperately trying to forget. Beyond that, however, we feel it a sacred duty, an obligation to speak on this subject as long as we are able to, particularly in view of the fact that there are so many people that deny the existence of the Holocaust, including some leaders of states and nations who go to all lengths to deny the Holocaust, trying to rob those who died so brutally with dignity and death. In particular, we are pleased to find young people among those who came to listen to us, to see that they hear the message, because it becomes their responsibility to prevent future things from happening like that. We therefore give you a clear, honest and true pictures of our life as we lived them in Germany. I asked my wife to speak first, and she will, during the course of her speech, talk to you about a kinder transport. I don't know how many of you are able or are knowledgeable about that, but let me quickly say, following Kristallnacht, a member of the British Parliament made a motion to accept 10,000 Jewish children under the age of 16, provided they will not become a burden to the state. The Foreign Minister, Sir Samuel Hoare, approved of it, and it was passed in the Kindertransport. That was parents sending their children to England began somewhere around the end of 38 and ended about the end of August 1939 because the war started on September 3rd. And it's estimated there are about 9,000 children were saved that way. Okay, I'm turning you over to Mira.
Hello everybody, I'm glad that you're here and I'm trying my best to bring this for you. It's not an easy thing for me to do. I was born on February of 1927 in Leipzig, Germany, which is located in the northeast of the country, fairly close to the Polish border. My father had died 3 months prior to my birth, and my mother raised me by herself. My mother had 5 brothers, 3 of whom lived in Leipzig. They all had businesses, which are often visited being sure of getting a coin or two, which quickly found their way to the nearest chocolate shop. Although being without a father, I had what seemed to me a normal childhood, when I felt much a part of my city and my country. On January 1933, the Nazis had taken over the government, which was the same year I started school when I was 6 years old. Sometimes during the year 1934, a law forbidding all Jewish children to go to public schools. All Jewish children had to go to the one and only Jewish school. I did not realize it at that time, but our education was nothing short of chaotic. Being a little girl, however, everything seemed pretty normal to me, until one day in August of 1934, the President of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, died, and the Jewish people really began to worry. Although a lot of things had happened to the Jews since the Nazis took over, the death of the President left no barriers for them to do as they pleased. It was on a very early Friday morning, October 28, 1938, when our doorbell rang. When my mother, still in her nightgown, opened the door, 2 men, it's apart, there and came up into our apartment. One of them, an older man, was dressed in normal clothing, whereas the other wore the Nazi brown shirt uniform. They ordered us to get dressed and told us we had to go with them. The older man, he must have felt sorry for us, turned to my mother and quietly told her to take a little suitcase and some warm clothing. When she questioned why, he did not answer. We left our house and walked with them to a nearby police station where many other Jews, some of them we knew, were already there and waiting. After some time, buses came and took us to the train station where a special train was set aside for us. Once the train was filled, we left heading east. Many people assumed that we were being sent to Poland, which indeed what happened. Once we reached the border, we were told to get off the train and line up 6 abreast and to march forward. As we started to march onto a large field, shots were fired over our heads from the Polish side, and as we tried to run back, the soldiers from behind us started to shoot as well. It was getting dark, and after the shooting stopped, we were left in that field, unable to go in either direction, while soldiers posted in front and behind us. We had no choice but to lay down in the open field a whole night, where it was bitter cold. By the time morning came, the Poles relented and let us enter the country, placing us into a large hall. They gave us some food as we had nothing to eat all day. We were placed with a family in Krakow, And after a while, my mother worried about school for me and started to see if she could place me in one. During the day, we went to a community center for food to meet with others where all kinds of rumors were circling. Sometime in December, my mother found out about the kinder transport and told me she had applied for me to go to England. In early January, we received my papers, and my mother packed a few things and took me to the train station, where many other children came as well. Although I was excited about going to England, I told her I did not want to go without her. She assured me she would follow within a couple of weeks. Satisfied me, but I didn't know it was not true. And as the train started to move, my mother ran along it, stretching her hand out to me. I was 11 years old and never saw her again. Through the Red Cross, I received a few letters from her, but nothing more after 1940. I found out after the war, and years later, that she too had been gassed in Auschwitz. The train took us to Gdynia, and we went by ship from there to London. On arrival, we were led into a large hall. Everyone wore a large name tag with our name and age hanging from our neck. Some children were picked up by what may have been relatives, but most of us waited while a group of ladies looked us over. Finally, a woman came up to me and said something I did not understand and took me with her. I very often asked about my mother's coming, but she was not very forthcoming. Once the war started on September the 3rd, 1939, she sent me to be evacuated. With thousands of children to cities across the country, we were evacuated into rural areas. After almost 3 years of living with different families in a small village called Longsutton in Norfolk, Mrs. Marks, the lady I had lived with in London, called me back home, where at the age of 15, I started a full-time job in a sweatshop sewing clothes and uniforms. And by the way, she kept all the money. I met my husband shortly before my 16th birthday, and we were married in July of 1944. Living in London during the Blitz and many other air raids was very difficult and dangerous. However, all of us were in the same boat, and the strength and fortitude of the British people was and is to this day an inspiration which helped me through many difficult times. We came to this country in 1948 and have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. In our retirement, we managed to spend the winter months in Florida, escaping the cold. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You did very well. Yeah, it's very emotional for my wife. I mean, we have to always, you may have figured out we're going to be celebrating our 70s in another month or so. So we know a lot about each other, I hope. As was said before, I was born in Munich, Germany in 1921. And Munich, the capital city of Bavaria, which is also very close to the Bavarian Alps, was a real tourist mecca. I remember as a child in the street, we would hear all kinds of foreign languages, which made it a more cosmopolitan city, although it only had about 1 million inhabitants, but it was much more cosmopolitan than some of the other inland cities, which helped us, I found out towards the end, in the late 38, 39, that the restriction that I found in cities like Berlin, where the people could drink from the same fountain in the public park, where they had yellow benches in the parks. We didn't have that in Munich. It was a little bit more relaxed, laid back. So that stood us in a little bit of good stead. Now, going back to around the turn of the 18th, 19th century, Germany, as today, is always and always has been the strongest economy in Europe. And that made it a magnet for many, many immigrants. particularly from East Germany, like Russia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, countries like that, so that many of them came to Germany at that time. And interesting though it may be, there were no restrictions on the Jews as far as pursuing a profession, getting a job, getting work permit, anything like that. There was nothing. It was almost to the degree like we find in this country. If a person wanted to become a professor, yeah, there were restrictions, there were limits to the amount, but we had that in this country too, probably still do certain places. But other than that, we were very intermingled, and the only thing is this, although we were all born in Germany beyond my grandparents, my parents and uncles, aunts, etc., we could never achieve German nationality. We would never get that. It's not like here when you're born in the country you get to become a citizen. But in Germany, as Polish Jews, we could not become German, so we always had to carry a Polish passport. It was kind of meaningless to us because we didn't feel any kind of friction between other people because of that we were as German as any other German. And the only difference, we went to synagogue where the others went to the churches, and that there was a great amount of commingling, intermarriage, but the thing that we bemoan a lot in this country today, stood at around 50%. So for a community that's a country that only had 600,000 Jews in 1933, which is 1% of the total German population of 63 million at that time, it is very insignificant. The real Jewish community, the major block of the Jewish community were the German Jews, those who trace their ancestry back in Germany to as much as 1,000 years. They have been living in one place or another, but always lived within Germany in the different duchies. And it was in 1848 when the German parliament, on a probationary basis, granted the Jews full citizenship and full rights. Although I said a moment before that there was no restrictions for schooling and profession, that never seemed to end them except the fact they couldn't vote, which we never could, but the German Jews, which represented about 85% of the total Jewish population, they were full citizens from 1848 on and lived as such. As I said, we found nothing unusual about it. We didn't discuss it. We had our holidays, they had theirs. We went together with them, and it was a very good, what they call gemütlich kind of a life. Germany is unfortunately, I would say, a very comfortable country to live in. Unfortunately, many Jews have returned there, which is beyond my understanding, but I'm not here as a judge. And in 1933, the Nazis took power on the 23rd of January 1933, seems like yesterday. The first thing they did, they created what they call a Volksgericht, that would be translated as a people's court, and that was set up throughout the country, and their own sole function was to expedite who Jews are from the society, take away their rights, dehumanize them, and all this kind of stuff. It has been recorded that during the period of the 12 years that the Nazis were in power, some 400 laws, ordinances were promulgated and put into law against Jews for the simple reason to remove them from society and remove them, dehumanize them. There was a newspaper called the Stürmer, which means the stormtrooper, I would say, and there was a man by the name of Streicher, again. He was the man from Nuremberg, and he published his newspaper, and there were, I don't know how many of you have ever been to Europe, but you may have seen in streets like Germany and France and places like that, where they have the pillars throughout the country where they advertise theaters and other events like that. And those, as well as public buildings, office buildings, and apartment buildings, had showcases with leaflets which were changed every week. And they depicted Jews in caricatures, very fat, very opulent, cigars in their mouth, money were dripping from their thing. Many of them were half man, half human, half rats. Most of them were depicted as molesting the pure Aryan blonde and blue-eyed German girl. This was changed every week. There were public loudspeakers set up throughout the country. There was no such thing as telephones or computers. And speeches were made constantly, and it was never missed to do some depicting against the Jews. And I have a strong feeling that Mr. Streicher must have been a knowledgeable Talmudist, because they quoted from the Talmud constantly, of course, 180 degrees opposite to what it really was. So they did a good job on dehumanizing us, of making it probably easy to do what they had planned to do in the first place. It's been publicized pretty much in the newspapers on and off that on the 1st of April, all the Jewish stores in Germany were closed, and in front of the stores was a pair of Nazi brown shirts, they called them, posted with bayonets, guns and bayonets, and prevented people from going into the store. Now, it was the first token of a boycott. It was a terrible thing. Everybody was besides themselves, but it was just like an overture. It didn't last more than 2 or 3 days, and then it went away again. But we all had this beginning of certainty that things are going to be different. I got to bring you back for a moment. The economy in Germany was horrendously bad. They had lost the war. Unemployment was very high. Every couple of months, a different chancellor was appointed to try and correct the situation. So when Hitler came, the general opinion of the people were, well, he will be another month or 2 and then he'll be gone. But of course, when he burned down the Reichstag, which is the House of Parliament, in February of 33, then people pretty much knew that things are going to be different. I'd like to throw in here a comment that I hear so often, that people didn't want to leave Germany and didn't want to go elsewhere. There is a truth. Let's, if we can possibly imagine, I'd like not to do that, but if something maybe should happen in this country, how we would feel, we would not be able to accept it. Therefore, these people have lived in Germany for hundreds of years. They could not accept this. But more than that, they couldn't go anywhere. There wasn't a single country that was willing to take them. Even that little Palestine, which was under the mandate by the British, the doors were closed in 1936 because they would not issue any more certificates due to the Arab pressure, so that we had no avenue out. There was a conference held that was called by President FDR Roosevelt. It was in Amiens, Switzerland in 1938, I think, or 37. And all the foreign ministers from all the countries came together and tried to find a way to solve the problem for the Jews. The conclusion was that no one had any opportunity to take it. Roosevelt couldn't take it because there was a big unemployment. And the one that really gave us the coup de grace was the foreign minister of Canada, who made the statement that one Jew is too many. So we knew the milieu that existed. We had nowhere to go. The Dominican Republic would allow people to come and stay there, provided they bring $1,000 with them, which was like I would be asked to spend a couple $1 million right now today, an impossibility. So we just couldn't get out of this place. It was May 10, on the 10th of May, the book burning. You have probably heard of the book burning in Germany. And I always walked around the town. I saw a little bit. I was a nosy kid. I always got a lot of interest in everything. And I saw people carrying books to certain places within the city. And there was one business district in the city, not far from where I lived. And I saw people coming out of libraries, coming out of schools, coming out of their houses, and they piled up in a pyramid kind of shape. Books. They must be 8 to 10 feet high. And nobody knew what it was, nobody could understand it. And as the evening came, I stood myself right nearby there, and And I saw them, they came, and that was a practice they had with the brown shirts they Hitler used, that they carried their open flame torches and marched through the streets singing songs and all this kind of stuff. This was done too, and when they reached this particular period of books that I stood by nearby, they threw the torches in it and burned all the books. They estimated at that time that 25,000 books were burned, and the books were books written by Jews, books written that had a un-German kind of context that was non-suitable for the German people. And I'd like to remind you here that Germany at that time stood at the pinnacle of education, culture, arts, you name it. Literacy was 93+%. And they brought themselves back 1,000 years with that movement alone. The poet Heinrich Heine made a comment many years earlier. He said, in a place where they burn books, they will burn humans too, and how right he was. In around 34, we were forbidden to attend public schools. I think Mira made a point on that, and we all had to go to a Jewish school. We had one building, a Jewish school that existed for the first 4 years, and we were all thrown together. Obviously, it was chaotic. There was not enough room. People came from different areas, they were at different levels, so the education was very chaotic. But we spent our days there and did the best we could. And then every once in a while, somebody was fortunate enough to get themselves an affidavit to come to America or something, which was very rare. I don't know if you noticed or not, but the State Department issued orders to the embassies and consulates in Europe to drag their feet, even if people had a legitimate affidavit to come to drag their feet. Many lost their lives because of that, but that's another thing. It was late 37, early 38 that we had that Polish action, the Polish deportation that Mira spoke about, going to the train. Well, being from Munich, I'm several hundred miles from the Polish border, so we were collected on Friday, October the 28th, and we herded into the police station. In the evening, we were all gathered up on buses and sent to a prison and kept in prison overnight. The following morning, we again were put on buses, and I want you to know we were very dangerous people because we were escorted by a group of soldiers with rifles and bayonets to make sure we don't run away. And then they put us on that train, and the train went east to Poland, but it was an almost an all-day trip. The train stopped once, and I don't know where and how it came about, but people came to the train and threw food into our train. Where, I don't know from what they did. And we came to a town called Guben, which is about 20, 30 miles from the Polish border. And the train stopped, and the Gestapo, the Nazi people that had escorted the train, asked for one person from each wagon to come out, and they had a conference, and it turned out that the whole issue was a fight between Germany and Poland about the corridor in Danzig. And they settled the differences, and we would be allowed to go home provided we paid for our own fare. But everybody took whatever money they had and brought it together, and we were fortunate we came back to Munich. Fortunate, I don't know about that, but anyway. We had an experience of about 2 or 3 days. And around that time, you were not allowed, if you had a radio, you were not allowed to listen to a foreign station. And how do they control it? Of course, they come to the house, they knock on the door. If the door is open, they walk, and if it's not open, you open, they walk right in. And I'm talking about the Nazi people. The first thing they do, they look for the radio, and they knocked over, and if the radio was warm, they put it on. They wanted to see what station it was tuned to. If it was the favorite station that we had to listen to, which we did, I mean, you would take your life in your hand, was Radio Luxembourg, where we got the news from the foreign countries. But we were very careful, and we had neighbors. We lived in a non-Jewish house except one other family. And that lasted for a little while, but then the order came, and they came to the house and picked up all the radios. Every Jewish house had to deliver their radio to the police. Now, in reviewing these notes before I come here to talk to you, something came back to me that I had completely forgotten. When I came home and we had no radio, we had this other Jewish family, and they had a couple of sons, one of them about 4 or 5 years older than I said, how can they take our radios? We're not German. So I took my passport. This is this big 17-year-old snot-nosed. I took my passport, and there's another guy took his passport, and we went to the police and said, we're Polish citizens, you can't take our radio. And instead of locking us up, he gave us our radio back. I guarantee you I wouldn't do it today. But anyway, I don't attend to that. And following very shortly after that was everyone, German Jew, had to turn over all their belongings, their jewelry, their silver, their gold, their Kiddush cup, their cutlery, silver cutleries. Everything had to be turned over. They had to go to the police station and deliver all of their properties. There was some advance, the rumor mill that goes on in those situations. There was, people had noticed it was that one German family gave my sister a set of silver cutleries. She was on her way to England to become a maid, which a lot of Jewish women did, and saved their life. So they got that out and they got it back, but everything had to be turned over. And then, of course, very shortly after that, on Wednesday, the 9th of November, following the assassination of a consular officer in the Paris German consulate, Herbert von Raab, he was assassinated by a Polish teenager. Greenspan was his name, and we had what they call Kristallnacht. That was the night of the broken glass. We got a knock on our door about 3, 4 in the morning. It was extremely early. And they said, our Jewish neighbor said, I just found out they're arresting all men. So we took our passports, my father and I, we took off and we walked through back roads and wherever to the Polish consulate, hoping to get the safety, which indeed we did. When we got there, the courtyard was a villa with a large yard, was filled with people who were in the building, and we stayed there from that morning till the following morning, through the night. And then the consul sent word down that it is safe for us to go home. And then, of course, we walked home the shortest possible way. And on the way home, I saw destruction, and only can I equal it during the Blitz in London. I saw houses where the window frames were ripped out, furniture strewed all over the place. In the business districts, the big show windows, the front glass windows, splattered all over, merchandise, half burned, it was incredible. We had to walk in the middle of the street to get through. Literally, ankle deep the glass was there. There was blood in the stone. Cemeteries were desecrated. Synagogues were burned. We found out a little later that somewhere around 200 men had been thrown from their windows from their apartment to their death. But everyone, every male from the age of 16 was locked up and taken to either the police, a prison, or to the Dachau, the concentration camp, which was the only one in existence at that time. When we got back home, my mother and sister was fine, but I found out about our synagogue, so we went there, and they could not burn down the synagogue because it was in a courtyard surrounded by apartment houses. So if they would have burned the synagogue, they probably would have burned some of those places. So what they did instead, they created a fire, kept it kind of under control, but doused it with water like you wouldn't believe. All the Latin, the Torah scrolls, ripped apart, books, tefillin, you name it, all over, piled up high all over, the benches turned over, half burned. a couple of people used the place as a latrine. It was incredible. So we got somebody to bring us some burlap bags and we put everything. It took several days to clean it up and we buried it and we had to according to our custom. And so it turned out to be really the coup de grace. After that, there was, life was just impossible. I would just like to go over one more thing before I close, and that is about us children. I was 12 years old when the Nazis came, and we were living, as I said, intermingled with families and everything else. But as soon as this thing started, within 3 to 4 months, the children wouldn't talk to us, they wouldn't play with us. We had lived together, they came to our house, we came to their house. We were shunned, and not only that, when you walked alone in the street, and you should meet a group of boys that met you in the street, whether you knew them or not, they would make sure that they would give you a kick, knock you over or something, something nice and pleasant. So all told, it was a terrible, terrible experience. I'm only giving you words of historical events the way they took place. To describe it, I'm not adequately able to do that, to give you the feeling of what it was. Not to be able to go a policeman asking for help, because the policeman was the one that was just as bad, even if he didn't want to be. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that when the Kristallnacht was over, Joseph Goebbels, the Mishimitis, he went to the radio and spoke about Herbert von Braun, and he said that the people were so outraged at the assassination of this man that as much as the police tried to control them, they could not manage. And therefore, the Jews have to pay several $7 million to clean up and pay for all the mess that they have made. Because of my involvement in Zionism, it was mentioned here before, I got myself a visa to England to go on Haftarah. That was about a month before the war was over, so I was pretty lucky I got out. And with that, I thank you for listening.
To Rolf and Mira for taking the time out of their day to come here and to talk to us on the Holocaust Memorial Day. And it really makes you think how important it is to always talk about this and to remind everyone that this event took place and that we should always make sure that we never repeat history. So I just want to open the floor up to discussion and questions that you guys may have. And we're so honored that you're able to be here with us today. I was thinking I might start it off. As someone who experienced the Holocaust, such a tragic event, how does it make you feel when you think about things that are going on in global affairs, like such as Ukraine? I mean, specifically, because I remember reading that they were making the citizens there report that they were Jewish, and they had to send in papers. How does that resonate with you to think that things could possibly repeat itself?
You have to talk slowly, we can't.
I was saying, the situation in Ukraine.
Okay. I'm having a great, great dilemma.
I'm sorry about
I
that.
cannot feel sorry for the Ukrainians. I do not like the Russians, but I don't like the Ukrainians because they, of all people, were the most willing executioners.
Except it wasn't.
I can't begin to tell you the things that I know that these people were capable of doing. So, yes, I'm sorry that the situation has arrived, that it has evolved. I'm frightened that it could lead to something I sincerely hope not. But feeling sorry for the Ukrainians, I'm having a big, big problem. I cannot blame those people that are alive today, but I can guarantee this almost, should it possibly ever happen again, they would be in the forefront doing the same thing, I think. This is my opinion. I hope they can settle the difference.
Yeah, I think you misunderstood.
Because Putin has a husband to go into another country, but that's the way it works.
She was asking about the
That question I didn't get the answer. One of my side effects of aging is the hearing aids. I got them, but I don't seem to work. That was a ruse set up by the Russians without a question. Those flyers, those things, because they wouldn't do that. At this point in time, where they are fighting for their existence with Russia, they wouldn't start with this kind of a thing. I'm positive. Because all the buildings, the government buildings, I think, are occupied by Russian people or Russian favoring people. So I don't believe that this thing that happened is, I wouldn't say it didn't happen, but it didn't come from the Ukrainians. I'm sure of that. Because it went away after one, and nobody followed it up. Nothing. It was just one big flash in the pan and nothing. One single policeman went over to the Jews and raised their hand, nothing. So, you know, politics is a funny game.
So I was going to open it up if anyone else has any questions.
It must have been very, very precise.
Don't be shy.
You have an extra microphone.
Oh,
that
that's
helps a
good.
lot, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you get back? Is it on?
Yes.
Yes?
Hi, Ralph and Mira. I know you both very well, and I've wondered this, not with you certainly, and with other people that I know are survivors. After going through that, how do you keep this? You're uplifted and great attitude. You're such bright, happy, content people. How do you do that?
Because of us.
It's very, actually, really terrible. Sorry.
Okay, in spite of what you've both gone through, how do you, after that, maintain such a great attitude that you have?
So in spite of everything that you've been through, how are you able to be so content and happy and so how are you able to content?
How are we still content and happy?
Yeah.
Well, we met each other. We love each other. We are very lucky. We have children, 2 children, 4 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren. I mean, how could you not be happy about that? And so I try very hard not to remember the past. And when I was young and busy bringing up the kids and going to work and everything, hey, somehow, but now that I'm old, it comes back. I wish it wouldn't, but it does. So I try to deal with it, and that's how it is.
The one, we know there are a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists that have themselves, set themselves up as counseling for the people, the survivors. And they have come to the conclusion that it is the most unusual phenomenon because we usually say time heals. In this particular case, it doesn't. And one of the biggest problems that we have is when we think about those that haven't survived. Why did we? And it gives you a feeling of, yes, gratitude, yes, but a tremendous feeling of guilt when I try in my mind. And another side effect of age, you don't sleep as much as you would like to. You have all those things parading through your head. And you often say to me, why did this guy, he was so smart, he was so good in school, how come he didn't make it? How come I did? You know, this is a conflict that constantly works on you. It's very difficult to describe because of the senselessness of the moment.
Thank you for sharing a very painful experience with all of us. I wondered in the early years, did you ever think in the early years to go to Palestine?
Oh, yes.
Did you ever think to go to Palestine?
She said in the early years,
Was it easy to learn everything?
I'm terribly sorry that I'm not was able to understand your question. But I'm not in Palestine, I'm not in Israel today, much to my regret, but the reason sits next to me. So, I was on HaShoah. I was going to go to Palestine at the time, but we have done a lot of wandering. She was without a family for a long time. She lost her whole family. And when I was in contact with some of the people in Israel at the time, and they wanted me to come over, and I approached my wife on this. She said, absolutely not. It was a choice, so that's why I did it. I regret, I still say I regret not having gone there, really. Maybe I really didn't want to force, no matter. But yes, I always wanted to be there. We have been in Israel at least 13 or 14 times. We spent 2 months once in different years, living there for about...
My granddaughter had a bat mitzvah in the Sada.
Yes.
So we are connected with Israel. We have a large family, or did and so we are connected with Israel very strongly. And whenever we could leave the country on any vacation, whenever we could leave the country to go on a vacation, we always go to Israel. I remember on the Sheish Yamim, after the 6-Day War, we had a vacation booked to go to Jamaica, and when the war broke out, of course we canceled it, and we gave the money to Israel. It was a little fight, and when the war was over, Rabbi said to me, now we're going to Israel, and I said, what are we going to use for money? And what shall I tell you, we did go to Israel. And we were there 1 week after the war had ended, no, 2 weeks. And we walked up in the Galilee between the landmines and everything else, and a little nice anecdote I can tell you. After this, my cousin's husband, an Iraqi lawyer, he was a member of parliament in Israel, Chava Knesset, they call it. And when we spent 2 weeks with our family, and he said on this Sunday, that he said, I have a special pass, I can go into the territories, because I'm a diplomat, I'm part of the government. So we leave very early, and we're going to go to Jordan and all these places. Excellent, we went into the car, we go and we drive, and we come to within about, I would say, a mile and a half from the border, and there was one solid line of cars. I said, Marty, what is this? Best diplomatic pass? He said, it's Israel. What do you want? That's what it is. Okay, I thank you so very, very much.